from your vantage point, how would you rate Justin Trudeau's ethical conduct in recent months?
Yeah, well, Ezra, I would say that our whole parliamentary system depends on ministerial responsibility. And we can go back through the history of Canada, the tuna gate, the orange juice, $16 orange juice, the unethical purchase of an orange juice got that cabinet minister removed. So our parliamentary system, I would argue, can only survive on ministerial ethical responsibility. If that's lacking, our parliamentary system completely fails. So I would say the standard is much higher because it really is. It depends on ethical procedures. Now, if I look at Justin Trudeau, you could start from the day that he decided to charge charities while he's a member of parliament, paid to speak to children. He was a member of parliament paid to speak to charities and paid to speak to schools, young high school kids. He charged a fee. I mean, that's unethical. He did return some of the money at that time. So his unethical roots go right to the beginning. But the major five elements, the SNC Lavalin, we've never seen in history the Attorney General, which is there to protect Canada from wrongdoings from members of parliament or even the prime minister, that Attorney General was removed. Never in history. I mean, in America, the removing of an Attorney General will get you impeached. Trudeau removed the Attorney General because he wanted to cover up his obstruction of justice. There's number one, an unethical conflict. Number two, we all know that he was found guilty not once, but twice for unethical practice under the Conflict of Interest Act. Now there he personally gained, in one instance, he got a beautiful private island, and some say the cost of that island, if it were to be, bought, it'd be about $200,000 for his family. And the deal was give something to the owner of that island, and they got a grant, and that was unethical and found guilty. So there's three examples, and then and Trudeau gets away with it. And when you get away with unethical behavior, you're emboldened and you do more. I found that the Emergency Act was clearly was not called for, and Trudeau, to make sure that he stacked the odds in its favor, appoints Judge Rouleau. Judge Rouleau has been involved in the Liberal Party since the 1970s, was part of John Turner's transition team, was appointed and was a major donator to the Liberal Party his whole life. He should never have taken that appointment, and Trudeau should never have appointed him. But Trudeau knows that by appointing friends and family, he can get away with more unethical conduct. Ezra, you and I know as lawyers, there has to be no bias, but also no apprehension of bias. Right. That is, anyone that watches and say, and sure, the person might be great, but I have a suspicion that he might be biased. If there's even a hint of suspicion of bias or any apprehension of bias, the person cannot sit. Right. I mean, in my law career, a good friend of mine was a judge, and she came from a very good law firm. She wouldn't hear a case from one of her ex-partners, and it was a big law firm, because she felt that people might think that she was biased hearing her old partner's case. That's the level of there was no bias, there was no evidence of bias, but she didn't want to see anyone say, "Oh, but your decision, we feel there's an apprehension of bias." Right. Out it goes. I mean, Judge Rouleau, I watched his behavior. Justin Trudeau committed perjury in that hearing. He was asked directly, "Why did you disparage the unvaccinated?" He said, "I never did." And we know there's a video where he called them racist bigots and don't belong in our society. It was pure perjury, nothing picked up by the judge. And so whether you believe he was biased or not, you can absolutely be convinced there was a apprehension of bias. And so whatever that decision, and I've read it, whatever that decision says, it reeks with bias because of the apprehension. Then he's emboldened. I mean, he gets away with that. I mean, the madness of it, CBC and all the legacy media were arguing, well, he's a wonderful judge. And that's not the point. The point is, does the public feel that there's a bias? And if the public feels a bias, the question ends, he should be removed. And that was, you don't argue whether, and that also happened with the appointment of, this is amazing, appointing the CEO of the Trudeu Foundation to look into the China influencing of elections, who received hundreds, if not millions of dollars from China. I mean, but he appointed the head of the Trudeu, CEO of the Trudeu Foundation, to provide an opinion whether the
he had a Trudeu Foundation insider, Morris Rosenberg, I think was his name, write a report exonerating him, and now he's appointed David Johnson, his lifelong family friend, who is so pro-China he sent all his kids to school in China.
Right.
Even after he was no longer Governor General, he would still call the Chinese embassy to talk about who knows what. Was it friends? Was he working for them? Was he working for someone to lobby them to choose him? I mean, it's just incredible. There's a lot of sayings in law, a lot of legal maxims. Sometimes they're even in Latin. They're so ancient. One of them in English is justice must be done, but it also must be seen to be done. Because that's how you get confidence in the justice system. And there's language that is in so many laws and codes of conduct about bringing the administration of justice into disrepute. That's the phrase, bringing the administration, because it's not just important that each case is handled fairly, but you must have public trust in the system. The only way the system works is if people believe in it. Another analogy would be the only way people believe that a game or a sport is fair.
Right.
It's not just that the referees were fair in that one case. It's the entire sport is sporting. And that's sports, but this is the government. Manny, I think that public trust in our institutions has got to be at an all-time low. I saw a story just recently in Blacklocks suggesting that trust in institutions, whether it's police or judges or the media or even schools, is at an all-time low. And I think it's because people like Justin Trudeau are leveling down. They're not increasing public standards, they're decreasing them. And we're sort of in a race to the bottom.
Well, that's true, but I wouldn't even call it leveling down, Ezra. I call it exploiting for your own benefit. And the media sits silent while Trudeau has a history. And the fifth one I was going to mention was appointing the interim ethics commissioner, who happens to be the sister-in-law of a cabinet minister who was found guilty of an ethics violation. I mean, that's how brazen it is now. That's how, like, you were caught 5-6 times. You would think that you would say, okay, look, I can't bring the disrepute of Parliament any further lower. And he does.
That was an excerpt from the Ezra Levant show. I'm Ezra Levant. Every weekday, I do a monologue about the topic of the day. Then I interview a fascinating guest, either in studio or via Skype. And then I read your mail, whether it's fan mail or hate mail, which is sometimes even more interesting. This is on our premium service, though, called Rebel News Plus. Go to rebelnewsplus.com. It's $8 a month or less if you buy a whole year in advance. You get my show every weeknight, plus Sheila Gunn Reid's show every week. It's called The Gun Show. It's pretty amazing. You know, we rely on you because we do not take a dime from the government. In Canada, that makes us almost unique. So please help us out and help yourself to some great journalism at rebelnewsplus.com.